Hello and welcome to this special edition of Billy the Batboy's Corner presented by Up On Game. I'm Billy Pinckney, and today we're going to be diving into the 2022 MLB season, and obviously it being concluded this past weekend as the Houston Astros defeated the Philadelphia Phillies in Game 6. Houston Astros are the World Series champions, and not many people are happy about it aside those Houston fans in that surrounding area, but they absolutely deserved it. They had the most complete roster of all the teams in the league and did everything they possibly can to win that title. I mean, their bullpen was electric. Starting pitching was solid. Framber Valdez looked great. Verlander wasn't bad, wasn't fantastic, but he did provide some quality innings for them. And offensively, they were absolutely crushing the ball. Alex Bregman, somebody who Joe Madden told me, World Series champion manager, right before the series started, that he's a pest. You know, he's going to be a guy who really makes you pay if you make a mistake. And he obviously turned out to be a very, very great weapon for Dusty Baker. Another guy, too, Jeremy Pena. I mean, could any of us have seen that coming? Rookie shortstop who actually raised the possibility for winning Rookie of the Year this year in 2022. It's between him and Julio Rodriguez now, because Julio obviously had a great year as well for the Mariners, but what Pena has done at this level, coming in as a rookie, replacing Carlos Correa, the star shortstop who went over to the Twins, putting up great defensive numbers, offensive numbers, and the numbers that he put up in the World Series, it's never been seen before. Homering in games, become the first rookie to do this, to do that. That's something that's so much more valuable than what someone could do in a regular season, because he's doing it when it matters. And if you're able to have those kind of numbers in the postseason, you're going to be valued as a much, much better player. So it's going to be interesting to see how they vote on Pena and Rodriguez. But the guy who I'm most happy for with the Houston Astros is their manager, Dusty Baker. And he's somebody who managed the most games out of anybody without winning a World Series, and he finally has it. He's a great guy to be around. I never met him yet, but every single person who comes in contact with him says great things about him. The players, he's a player's coach, and it's exciting to see that he finally earned his ring as a manager, and I'm happy for the Astros overall. I mean, I'm a Yankee fan, but it's good to see when you're playing solid, clean baseball, and the players deserve it. But we can't talk about the Astros winning it without discussing the Philadelphia Phillies. What a run they had. And a lot of credit goes to Dave Dombrowski, their general manager, in constructing this roster a little bit more old school than some of the other guys in the league who are managing these rosters. And he's a GM who made some additions this past year. Kyle Schwarber being a big name that he added onto this team. And he obviously was pretty clutch as well, hitting some big homers in big-time spots. And the Phillies have nothing to be ashamed about. Even Nick Castellanos, he also played a major role. They said in the past that his defense was no good, right? He wasn't a good acquisition, but he made some very great defensive plays that all-star caliber players make. And that's what you need in the postseason, is solid defense. And Bryce Harper, too, having a fantastic postseason, really living up to the hype. For years, Bryce Harper was known as somebody who's overrated, but to see what he was able to do in front of those big lights with everybody watching was special to watch, and showing you, hey, this guy is legit, and maybe he's not as overrated as some may believe. So what do you do if you're these two teams? What's next? Well, for the Astros, you already have a few weeks of your offseason removed. So they're going to have a very short offseason. And that's the thing with World Series teams, especially the champions, is that it's kind of like a hangover after you win it all, because you're going to be getting right back at it much quicker than you expected it to be. They have their parade coming up, all these festivities, which is amazing. That's what they played for all year. But they also have to realize that once they get back home, they got to take their preparation very seriously and finding a way to fully recover, deal with any nagging injuries that they dealt with later in the year, and find a way to be completely healthy, well-rested, and ready to go once they report to spring training in February. But for the Phillies, a major thing that they have to do is see and evaluate what pieces they need to keep and what pieces they need to add. Because obviously, if you come up short, there might have been a couple things that went wrong, a few pieces that weren't as strong as you would have liked to it have been. And I look at the bullpen, perhaps you got a few arms in the bullpen that you need to sign in free agency or make a couple trades. And another thing, shortstop, do you go after a guy like Xander Bogaerts? He's somebody who opted out of his contract with the Red Sox. The Red Sox are going to try to re-sign him along with Devers and extend him. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But also, if you're the Astros, you have to see how can we get back to this spot next year. You reach your goal. So mentally, are these players going to be complacent and say, hey, we did it. Now we're just chilling. We're going to sit back and just relax and what happens next year happens. No, you got to have that drive to say, hey, we're going to defend that title. We're going to go back out there and do it again. And once you start winning, trust me, you want to keep doing it. And you want to get back out there and add another ring to your finger. So that's going to be the tricky thing for them, is being ready to go energized for next season. And they need to keep all the pieces that they had. So if you're a World Series team, you're always looking to improve. But as long as they're able to bring a guy back like Verlander, who's a free agent, those are little pieces that are key to the puzzle. And we'll see what they end up doing in the first few weeks of free agency. Another big piece of news is that the New York Mets extended closer Edwin Diaz 5 years, $102 million. It's a great splash. First few days of free agency, they get the deal done. It's something that they needed to do. And being the first move, it makes sense for them. You got to start from the closer to other back-end guys and lower end of the bullpen guys, because he's somebody who not only provides a force on the field and is an electric pitcher, but he also provides this entertainment value that is vital in the success and energy of a fan base. You see the trumpets and everything that his entrance song brought to the table. It's definitely a key move for them, and I look at that being the beginning of a snowball of moves that the Mets begin to make. And it's great to see it happen early in the offseason. Put some of the Mets fans' minds at ease because of the way their season ended. It was unfortunate for them, but I do see them back to where they were last year and being a successful team led by Buck Showalter, who did a fantastic job managing this team and finding a way to get even farther in the playoffs and battling with Philly again in 2023. Speaking of New York, I do want to touch on the New York Yankees and see what they need to do in order to beat the Astros next year. The most complete team in the league, the Houston Astros, have been a thorn in the Yankees' side for years. Back in 2017, we all know how that ended, with the Astros taking that series and with allegations and the cheating scandal with the sign stealing. And man, the Yankees need to make some moves. They just do, and there's a lot that could happen early on. It's going to be a very interesting offseason for them. Obviously, Aaron Judge is a free agent and somebody who they need to lock up as early as they can to set that precedent of, hey, this is what we're doing. We're totally committed in the future of this team, spending some money because they have the money, and finding ways to piece together the right people and putting the players in the right spots in order to be successful. And I see after signing Judge, if they can, also it has to be reasonable, right? They can't go crazy. What I see them doing is, since he's already 30 years old, he went to college and he went through the system, which took a little bit more time off of his big league career. I see them signing him to a shorter term deal, but more of a higher salary per year. So I see the annual average salary, maybe we see $35 million per year, $40 million. I mean, it's getting to that point where they didn't sign him during the preseason, and now they got to pay the price of not doing that. And he bet on himself, and he won that bet pretty big time, right? He's going to probably be the MVP if Shohei Ohtani doesn't get it. And it's somebody who they need to have in this culture, because if you're a Yankee fan, if you're anybody who has any involvement with the organization, you truly understand how much of an impact he has on the team, on the fan base, and the overall culture of what the New York Yankees represent. So I see him being one of the first moves that they need to make before focusing on anything too minor. And then they have to approach and say, hey, what are we going to do with the pieces that we have that we need to move on from? And what do we need to do to add to our weaknesses that is one of the reasons why we fell short. And you look at the bullpen, they didn't do a bad job considering they lost half of it to injuries. So you have to evaluate and say, hey, we lost these guys due to injury. We have guys like Efros who won't be coming back next year, at least for most of the year, due to Tommy John surgery. Chad Green's a free agent, also recovering from Tommy John. Zach Britton's a free agent. He's most likely gone. Aroldis Chapman, free agent. He's definitely gone after the way his tenure ended with the Yankees. So you have to look at some back-end bullpen guys in free agency and perhaps pick up one of those guys. David Robertson, free agent, former Yankee, pitched pretty well in the postseason for the Phillies. Is he a guy they bring back at 37 years old? Who knows? He might be somebody who they give a chance to and try to make a reunion with and help add another World Series title under his belt like he did in 2009 with the Yankees. But I would look at a few bullpen pieces, and don't forget, there are always many good arms in AAA. The Yankees have a very, very solid farm system full of fantastic underrated talent, and they could definitely pull a couple of those guys up and they'll impress. And it reminds me a lot of Ron Marinaccio, who we had on the show before he made his debut with the Yankees. And he was some guy who they added to the 40-man roster, but no one really knew of too much. He had good numbers in AA and AAA. And he came up and started striking guys out, had a beautiful changeup, a slider with great movement, and the spin rate obviously looking fantastic. So guys like that, there are some of them. Greg Weissert, somebody who had a decent tenure with the Yankees this season, but he'll definitely be a guy who comes back and I believe will impress after he gets some more work in this offseason and develops his pitches even more after having that experience in the show. So definitely focusing on a few bullpen pieces is one thing. And another thing which struggled so much this postseason especially is the offense. Striking out a record number of times in a single series against the Astros, that cannot happen. It just cannot happen. So what I look at and I say, who are the major strikeout contributors? This time nowadays is all about front office analytics, what they're doing, trying to make this very robotic game and as efficient as possible. And I feel like it helps out the pitchers more than the hitters because the pitchers are able to be more dominant when you're focusing on the little things and focusing on the spin rate and really pinpoint accuracy with these pitches and tunneling and all these other buzzwords that come up. But for the hitters, they're really struggling. I do think the shift will help out the offenses across the league, but you really have to reduce the amount of strikeouts. Something that the front offices are blind to is strikeout rate, and they don't seem to care as much as they should. Getting the ball in play, making things happen, hitting the ball the opposite field are things that they need to improve on. And one way they could do that is by acquiring players from around the league who are already doing that. Bringing a guy like Andrew Benintendi back, I feel, is vital. He's someone who hits for average, gets on base a lot, high OPS, and he's somebody who could hit at the top of the order. They lacked a leadoff hitter this postseason with both Benny and DJ LeMahieu out due to injury. DJ coming back, I feel like he'll be another fantastic presence in the lineup who's able to bat in between guys like, hopefully, Judge if he's back, and Giancarlo Stanton, and Anthony Rizzo, another player who I love to have back in that lineup as well. He provides this sense of balance. Even though he might not hit for the highest average, he's still a player with high WAR, and wins above replacement is huge, obviously, with these players nowadays, and a stat that's looked at a lot. And he puts the bat on the ball with 2 strikes is clutch, unlike a lot of players we've seen. I mean, when he has to get the big hit, he makes it happen. He chokes up, he gets the bat on the ball, hits at the opposite field, and that's something that you definitely need out of a player like that from the left-hand batter's box. Overall, they're not in a bad spot, but they do have to make moves that make the most sense for what they're trying to do, and that's beat the Astros. You have to take a page out of their book, and they have such a complete team that you have to say, hey, this is what they're doing. We got to replicate this and do it in our own way in order to even have a remote chance of beating them in 2023. It'll be exciting to see what the rest of the league does. We're going to touch on more of this in the coming weeks here on Billy the Batboy's Corner, presented by Up On Game. We'd like to thank you for tuning in. We have a lot more coming this offseason. It's going to be very exciting to see the guests that we have on the show. Some very notable names coming on very, very soon. If you'd like to learn more about what we're doing here with Billy the Bat Boy's Corner and Up On Game, be sure to check us out on social media at Billy the Bat Boy, at Up On Game. Rate, review, subscribe, and don't forget we're supporting the Father English Center in Paterson, New Jersey, helping out that charity, doing what we can to help out the kids, and of course, for baseball, the younger players out there. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time here on the show.